Ken Kraetzer for CBSI Talking Business. Today from our home office here in Harrison, New York, have our good friend Jack Hojnar in from Chicago. Jack's our Chief Marketing Officer. Has had a long, illustrious career in financial services and technology, former Allstate executive, and also with Peapod in Chicago. Good to see you, Jack. Good holidays.
Yeah, great holidays. How about you?
Very good, very good. And this year, looking at holiday retail and online sales trends, Amazon really came through, generating consumer confidence that they would be able to deliver packages on time, and they really made a massive logistical effort on that. What did you see?
It's interesting because I can speak as a consumer, right? Just as an advocate and take off my marketing hat for a second. First time ever, I purchased all of my items on Cyber Monday when there were tons of discounts going on, not only at Amazon but other retailers. Found the experience to be amazing. I read about, and you and I talked about this earlier today, I read about the dangers of leaving packages at your house, so I had things shipped to the office. But boy, the process is amazing nowadays, and talk about setting a benchmark for retailers, right? To know that you can shop for something, get a great discount, price shop if you need to, and have things delivered within 48 hours or less in some circumstances. It's a crazy bar being set by Amazon. Really good.
And you being in Chicago, I got to mention, when I worked at Dean Witter years ago, Sears Roebuck was our parent company. It's sad to see them struggling, but some retailers have been able to thrive, and others, some of the traditional long-standing retailers, have struggled. What does it take to be successful in retailing these days?
I've got to tell you, I see the same thing. Lord & Taylor was a staple in Chicago. Marshall Field's years ago was bought by Macy's. I think the Gen Z and Millennials are, and again, I'm not a retail expert like some of the other people you've had on the show. I think Gen Zs and Millennials are really setting the table for expectations. They're comfortable with ordering something and sending it back. I think you and I may have grown up in an era where you wanted that tactile experience, right? You wanted to touch the clothes, feel them. I can speak from just my reading and experience at home and raising some Millennials and Gen Zs that I think the challenge for retailers is accepting the fact that people are willing to order something, they don't like it, ship it back. Again, that's where I think Amazon's processes are amazing, because if for some reason you don't want to keep an item, they include a shipping return label, all those types of things. So I think that's going to be the new challenge for the brick and mortar environment.
Certainly is. And Jack, you've been looking at key trends in the past year, going into now we're into 2019. I know millennials, mobile payment adoption. Some of the things between banks and fintechs are at the top of your list. Tell us a little bit about some of the trends that you see.
Yeah, well, one of the things we've been talking about recently, and in fact early this morning, was what are some of the things that are taking place, particularly in areas that we know as specialties. And I'm going to refer to my notes here, but let's talk about payments for a little bit. I see 5 key trends. I think there's more, but let's talk about these 5. Millennials and Gen Zs, they interact with payments in a way that we never really have. And one of those ways is through things like Venmo, mobile payments like Apple Pay. You probably even see Starbucks. You know that Starbucks has a reloadable card. More retail stores are starting to adopt that philosophy so they can apply points programs and loyalty programs to that. So millennials and Gen Zs are really driving how payments work. And so we're going to be paying a lot of attention to that as a trend. Mobile payment adoption. In 2014, Apple came out with their Apple Pay. And the convenience of it is fantastic. But I think everyone has to understand it's not necessarily a replacement strategy right now. It's a supplemental strategy. And as long as it meets the needs of security and risk, right, we want to make sure that we can make those payments without a transaction being fraudulent. And it meets some level of convenience, meaning the retailers have to have that transaction capability. You'll see that the adoption is going to go up. It's already at 10%. And while that seems low, it's still super high given the volume of people that are out there. The merging of banks and fintechs, I think this is really an interesting
Tell us about
one.
that. That's a key thing.
Well, because that's where we hang out, right? And banks are doing a phenomenal job with artificial intelligence and machine learning and trying to figure out how to communicate with customers. But oftentimes they're just bigger, right? And their core skills or competency was providing those bank products in the first place. And so now come along these technology companies who are, everyone likes to talk about disrupting things, but they are. They're changing the way and making us rethink how we deliver those products and services. And so what's happened, what originally happened, which I think is kind of interesting, is that banks were, I think, were a little reluctant to partner, but then they started realizing, hey, these are great partnerships for us. And the fintechs like that too, because they didn't have the volume of growth of the customer base. So you're going to see a lot more partnerships happening in that arena. Final two trends of the 5 here: user experience and customer engagement, customer experience, huge. We see it all the time in some of the tools and products that we'll talk a little bit later about. Engagement is a buzzword for sure, but boy, if you're not paying attention to how the customer wants to interact with you, you're going to miss the boat. There are so many ways for customers to engage with us and with our clients. So imagine taking all this big data and learning, doing target marketing smarter and more addressably, and knowing that when a consumer comes to your site to interact with you, how do you customize that experience for them specifically? And then finally, and you and I talked about this briefly before we started this, right? It was amazing that I found this stat from an Accenture study that was done, fraud. That $31 billion of fraud is expected in the credit card world this year.
Yeah, that's an extraordinary number.
Crazy.
Figure that gets passed along to consumers. Yeah. I worked at Chase years ago, and we worked for numerous banking brands, and trying to stay ahead of fraud is a constant effort
for sure
in the banking industry. It has been since day one. But even more and more with trying to fight cybercrime and these different ways that fraudsters, as the industry calls them, have found to be able to basically steal from consumers and from the institutions. What are some of the areas that institutions are able to try to reduce fraud on their programs?
The thing that I've been reading is just so they'll take that same, let me stop ourselves for a second, or even myself. Artificial intelligence AI was a big buzz term, and now if companies aren't doing it, you're behind. So it is as solid a staple in a toolbox for marketers as anything else. And what's been happening is that they're taking that artificial intelligence that we would typically try to use for outbound or targeting, and really bringing that in-house to understand how can we manage and mitigate fraud. From my reading, the ability to truly stay ahead of the criminals by tracking those fraudulent behaviors, by understanding card interactions, consumers opting into certain things and giving permission to see things, and when that misses the mark, those to me are the big ways in which and banks and other institutions are going to be able to manage that. But it's a huge topic.
And you brought up some of the points that really dominated the conferences that we attended this year from PACE, Professional Association Customer Engagement, the Direct Marketing Association, Direct Marketing Club of New York, Hudson Valley Direct Marketing Club, some of the groups that we participated with, was learning how to manage big data. All this data that the internet is producing every day is just growing. I think a few years ago it was 16 billion pieces of data a day, and that's probably exponential since then. And using artificial intelligence, as you said, and machine learning, all the staples now in customer service and banking to try to manage customer data, be able to serve customers better, and as you said, try to limit fraud.
Yeah, it's really funny. We were working on a project about 4 years ago, specifically developing some mobile app technology to deliver our products and services in a certain way, and machine learning and AI at the time was really just scratching the surface. Data can become intimidating for some things, but there are so many tools and resources out there from all these tech startups that really make the processes easier. We're seeing in some of the tools that we use, you can actually really interact and engage with your own information and quickly decide, how do I service the customer better, or how do I understand their buying trends, or how do I respond to them in a way that makes sense for them? It's pretty amazing stuff.
Absolutely. And you made a key point about customer engagement. The meetings we've been going to all talk about being mobile first now. Next week we'll be at a presentation, the Direct Marketing Club in New York, the Bruce Beagle, the Winterberry Group will talk about ad spend and how it's shifted now towards online and largely now going to mobile. And so the campaign's first think, it used to be big screen TV, now it is, how is it going to look on the small screen of a mobile device?
Yeah.
And that's just a huge a trend that every marketer has got to work on.
Well, and the thing that's interesting, we've talked about responsive design for years as a way to make sure that any of your website matches a mobile environment, whether it's a tablet or a phone, right? But related to that I think is really important is that it's the use of that phone, the utility of that phone completely. We have a program called Snap Coverage where you can actually use the phone camera to take pictures of products that maybe break and you need to file claims against, SMS technology, DM for Twitter and everything else. The mobile phone, the mobile device being accessible and addressable wherever you are and whenever you are and however you are, it's just a staple of our lives now, right?
Absolutely. How it's changed, how you can service a customer, how you can provide information and sell and do customer service. It's so revolutionary.
Yep.
Again, things that we're going to be doing here at CBSI, we have a long history of supporting brands in the credit card and banking industry, and some of the benefit programs on purchase protection programs, warranty areas, and travel especially have been really well adopted, and a lot of them are frequently used by consumers. What have been some of the highlights that you're seeing?
Well, let me address it this way for you. There's four things. There's a ton of objectives on my plate this year, right? But there's four things that we're really focusing on because based upon all the data we just talked about, trends that we're seeing, the first one is really service delivery and advocacy. And by that I mean for our clients, because remember, we exist in a B2B, B2C world, right?
Yeah.
And so it's incumbent upon us to make sure we're advocating on behalf of the benefits and what those means from a consumer perspective, and then also educating and supporting our clients so that they can do the same for their bank customers. From a service delivery perspective, providing tools and resources that make those products and benefits work well. From an advocacy perspective, teaching consumers how to use our products. For example, we know in managing call centers that claims are a tough thing for people. I mean, if you think about, let me sidebar for a second. If you think about what we provide in services for our clients, we are not preventing pain. I can't prevent someone from having an accident with their rental car, but what we can do is mitigate that pain, right? We can help them, we can help alleviate that quickly through our auto rental insurance products, for example. So our goal is to make sure from an advocacy perspective that as consumers become more aware of these products, how do we make sure that when something does happen, the process is really smooth so that pain doesn't get exacerbated because we're not doing our job. So a big part of our strategy this year is to really work on that advocacy, right, and make sure that consumers understand stuff.
Absolutely. And one of the things that's been very exciting that you've been leading the effort on is working with our brands on being able to identify comments that customers make about their brands online, possibly on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and then being able to address those comments. It could be a need the customer has, a comment, and being able to get those comments and messages back to brands so they can be acted on as fast as possible. Tell us a little bit more about how we do that and why that's important.
Yeah, I'm going to start with an anecdotal story for you. Years ago when I went to go visit my daughter, who at the time was living out west, our flight got delayed. And in the process of the flight getting delayed, we were stuck on the tarmac because they were moving us back to the terminal. And everyone knew that they'd have to try to rearrange flights, and you can imagine the stereotypical line that rushes the counter. And so I went on my phone and DM'd the airline. I sent a direct message via Twitter saying, hey, flight delayed, help. Simple as that. And what ended up happening is before we got off the plane, had a new flight already arranged. So I take that as an anecdotal story, right? I may be atypical because I like technology, but the point is, when it comes to social media, organizations need to be prepared for those types of environments. And in particular with what we do, remember, we're an after the fact in most cases. We try to be preventative, but it's often when something happens, a trip gets canceled or delayed, right? A product breaks. So consumers may be in the middle of using or utilizing those things in their lives and they need something happening quickly. Imagine being overseas, for example, and you lose a passport or something happens with luggage. So we have to be prepared to hear people say these things. And what's really cool, I think, from the tools that we have now is that we're monitoring these conversations. And last thing I'll say on this, one of the things that we've done, which was, I think, semi-groundbreaking without boasting too much, is the fact that we started writing what we call emotive queries. People typically aren't going to write, I wonder if my ARCW is in effect, right? Our ARCDW, which is our collision damage waiver product. They're likely going to say things like, dang, it wrecked my car. So we started writing queries that would find those more conversational or emotive type experiences so that when that pops up, we can help respond to them quickly. And we're doing that more and more on behalf of our clients. And my hope is that they want to take more advantage of that too, that they're going to want to utilize that. Not everyone's on a social media platform yet, but consumers are getting there.
And one of the projects that we've been working with, we do a lot of work with PACE, Professional Association for Customer Engagement. They have been doing a lot of work on trying to reduce robocalling.
Right.
That's been a plague of consumers. One of the biggest complaint going to the consumer regulatory agencies in Washington. I have a good friend, Rebecca Johnson from Numerical, is leading a group called the Communications Protection Coalition. Yeah. And they meet with the carriers to work on different remedies so that even if calls are being blocked by carriers, there are ways for brands such as banks to reach their customers when they need to. And that's been a big effort. Certainly, trying to reduce robocallings is something that the whole, certainly the banking industry and the communications industry really has been trying to work very hard on.
Yeah, and the challenge there is that sometimes too often we take a blanket approach, let's get rid of all phone calls, and what ends up not happening is those important calls like potential fraud on your card doesn't get through to you, right? And as a result, you're missing out on some things. Yeah, I think the effort that she's doing is pretty phenomenal to try to correct some of those nuances.
And Jack, maybe just to kind of wrap up our session, it's great to chat. We're going to try and do this more often during the course of the year. Is there one particular trend or activity that you're going to be, really watching very closely and focusing attention so we can help our clients address, what's coming up in the year?
Well, there's two things.
Two things, okay.
Two things. The first thing is what we've talked about primarily already, and that's the consumer advocacy, the ability to use social media and understand how things are happening when they're happening. Okay, that's a big part for us now, and I think it's critical for our clients too. The second thing is I really want to help grow Talking Business.
Okay.
Because I think this is an excellent forum. I do. To anyone watching, you and I talked earlier this morning that I'm going to try to come out here monthly and talk about trends that we're seeing in the industry, and I think you're doing an amazing job of introducing to our clients a variety of professionals and industry leaders that maybe we don't think about, right? Like Rebecca Johnson, for example, may not be something we directly touch all the time, but a great relationship, and maybe some of our client partners would appreciate knowing more about them. So a big goal of mine this year is to make sure Talking Business gets even more viewership.
Well, we appreciate that, and we
sure.
appreciate the participants from many of the trade groups, our partners in the industry, being able to tell their story and learning about what they're doing, the solutions they're coming up for their clients. But we appreciate all of the banks we've had the chance to work with for many years, and looking forward to a very successful 2019. And Jack, thank you.
Thank you.
Jack Hojnar, our Chief
Always
Marketing Officer from our Chicago office. Good. And again, this is Ken Kraetzer here from our headquarters in Harrison, New York, for CBSI. And again, this is CBSI Talking Business. Have a great day. Thank you for listening.